Right, it is 7:06. Rail workers, nurses, ambulance drivers, border force, all on strike. Teachers on strike in Scotland, and English teachers could join them after Christmas, as 3 unions, including even the head teachers, are balloting members on action. Let's speak to Gillian Keegan, Secretary of State for Education. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you think a teacher strike in England is inevitable?
Well, I very much hope not. Obviously the teachers are balloting at the moment, but our children have missed enough education through the pandemic. So we're very much hoping that the £2 billion settlement, which was actually £2 billion each year for the next 2 years, which is actually what the unions were calling for and what we got in the autumn statement, we're hoping that is enough. We've accepted the pay recommendations in full. They're between 5% and 8.9%, depending on whether you're an experienced teacher or a new teacher. We've tried our very best to meet all of the requirements. But and also massive thank you to our teachers. They do that. Every day they're really working hard to help our children catch up, and we wouldn't want to see any of that lost.
So the pay review recommendation was between 5 and 8.9%. What do the unions want?
There's a range, actually. There's 4 unions, inflation or inflation plus 5% in some cases. So, but a lot higher than the independent reviews. And of course, the independent reviews take into account, they look at private sector pay, public sector pay, inflation. They look at a lot of factors as well. And of course, the energy price relief is in there to alleviate some of the impacts of inflation in terms of energy. So that's what they've looked at.
Is it different, though, Gillian Keegan, this time around because of energy prices, because of the cost of living? We hear about nurses, for example, using food banks. I mean, there is something happening right now. It's not just, an isolated group within the public sector. It's many, many parts of it. And that would suggest that it is true and it is a fact that people are struggling.
Oh, of course. I mean, look at the inflation that we have, and it's been a sudden shock. Every single person in this country, in fact, every single person in many, many countries across the world are struggling with exactly the same impact. Some countries have even higher inflation than we do. So, inflation, it makes everybody feel poorer. It makes everybody feel uncertain and concerned, which is why the number one thing we're focused on is to get inflation down. And the OBR think the measures we've taken in the autumn statement should start to bring inflation down next year. So that's the number one focus. You can't spend your way out of inflation. It is as simple as that. And if we looked at all the public sector the pay claims, it would cost us £28 billion. By us, I mean the taxpayers, the rest of us. So, it's a lot of money. So we have to have a sensible, reasonable, fair approach which balances those things.
OK, and that is an argument that is constantly and quite fairly levelled, that it would be too expensive, £28 billion. We'll be discussing that later on in the programme. But the counter-argument to this comes from one of our listeners. And they make a good point. They say it was only a few weeks ago when the government wanted to borrow $50 billion to give a tax cut to the rich. Now pay the workers instead. Why was that okay? I mean, I know it was short-lived.
Well, it wasn't okay. Well, we saw what happened. It was absolutely not okay. We saw what happened. We saw how the markets reacted.
Yeah, but it was advanced by a chancellor.
Yes, it was, and it was. I think we said very clearly mistakes were made, and the chancellor is no longer in place. So no, it is not. It isn't an approach that is sensible. It doesn't have. It's not the right economic response at this point. You can fuel inflation, or you can try and tattle inflation, and it's really a precarious balance to make sure that we tattle inflation. This should be. We know why this is happening, right? This is not due to anything the government's done. This is due to external factors. The overhang from the pandemic, and also the war in Ukraine, which is having a terrible impact on, well, obviously the people of Ukraine, but on all of us in terms of uncertainty, economic uncertainty and energy costs.
OK, let's move on because we have limited time. Let's talk about the education bill. You had plans for an education bill which you said would raise education standards. That's been axed now So what will happen to those education standards? They won't be raised?
Oh, no, we're still working on that. In fact, the bill, most of the things that were in the white paper, we've already started working on and we'll continue to work on. And educational standards and excellence are very much at the heart of what we're doing. And we've set even more stretching targets, actually, to try and meet for our young people to meet in terms of reading and writing and maths. So no, the excellence is still there. But there were some specific aspects which were part of legislation. So that's the thing that's not going to go ahead. But we are still looking to, there's some targeted things that we are still looking to do if we can in legislation.
But do you understand, Gillian Keegan, at the beginning of the interview you said, so the children lost so much education through the pandemic, we must prioritise their education, we don't want teachers to go on strike, and yet when it comes to the other bigger picture things, it seems that the government, Rishi Sunak, etc., don't seem to prioritise education.
Oh, it's 100% prioritised. That's why we got £2 billion extra each year in the next 2 years for education, one of the very few departments that got a big increase in the autumn statement. So it is prioritised. We have, school staff. In fact, go to our schools. There's a lot of things that we've even announced this week. We energy efficiency to help schools with their bills. Obviously, we have additional money going in. That will be we've given an indication, but that will be will go out to schools by the end of the year to say exactly how much they're getting. So there is a big priority in education, but also in skills as well.
OK, let me ask you about your colleagues and your soon-to-be former colleagues. Matt Hancock, Sajid Javid, not going to stand at the next election. Which one of them will you miss more?
Oh, I miss both of them. I've actually worked with both of them as I've been their PPS, both of them. Everybody, makes a contribution to politics. Sometimes people stay for a long time. Sometimes people come and then go on to a second career. Or sometimes people like myself get elected at the age of 49 and it's, after a long business career. So there's many, many different routes and many different people stay to contribute for a period of time. They've both been here, I think, since 2010. So they've contributed, 12 years. It'll be 14 years by the end of this Parliament.
OK, Gillian Keegan, thank you. She's Secretary of State for Education.